She fired me. It's the only job I've ever been fired from.
I really appreciate you saying this out loud because I can't even imagine you being fired.
I think I was so intense and I was so driven and I was so worried about doing it perfectly and right and never feeling like we were getting it right. I was the person who was always like, we need to do it better. We need to do it bigger. We need to scale it faster. I didn't take a moment to understand or be grateful for all the amazing things that were happening in the moment. When I look back now, I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe that we had these opportunities and we met these people and we did these incredible events and we built these brands. I didn't want to go forward feeling the way that I felt. I just felt like there had to be a way to be more happy, more joyful, enjoy it more. I was not happy. I let go to move forward. I let go to I softened, I think. He wrote very openly about his personal journey of using psychedelics to actually help him change his mindset. And that led me to think, well, maybe there's like something there. So I've been exploring this whole new world and it's had like a remarkable effect on me.
Hi, welcome to All Over Again podcast. I'm so excited to introduce Elizabeth Harrison. Not only does Elizabeth have 30 plus years of public relations and communications expertise, she has an agency that has reinvented itself multiple times, and she's also my former boss. So with that, I'd love to introduce Elizabeth Harrison. Elizabeth,
Hi, Natalie.
welcome.
Thank you. It's great to see you. You look beautiful. It's always great to see people who work for me go on and do amazing things. So thank you for having me on.
Thank you for being here. So, as I mentioned, you have this wealth of knowledge in the PR space.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I'd love to ask you is, with all of this experience, 30 years plus, looking back, if you could go back in time and say, okay, this was this thing that I would do differently as my 25-year-old self, either personally or professionally, what would it be?
Well, I think if you don't mind, I'm going to sort of set the stage a little bit about the agency and where I was at when I was 25, because I actually hadn't started my agency then. So I grew up in New York City. I grew up on the Upper West Side. My grandfather actually started Anne Klein, so I started in a very fashion kind of family, 7th Avenue, went to a lot of things early, went to boarding school, then went to Sarah Lawrence and actually had zero interest in PR or anything to do with any of this. What changed my life was actually living in Paris for a year, where I all of a sudden was sort of woke up to, wow, actually this idea of glamour and lifestyle and fashion is sort of in my DNA, right? So came back, and at that point, I actually did get the Devil Wears Prada job. I know Samantha said she did at Vogue. I had it at Elle Magazine. It was back in 1987 when Elle was just coming out, and I worked for Mary Russell. She was the fashion director, and she was an amazing, very chic, very sort of, eclectic, amazing woman. And at that time, it was a really interesting time in publishing. Hachette owned Elle, but during the time I was there, which was 3 years, Hachette actually merged with Murdoch. So the magazine was actually run by Hachette and Murdoch, and there were actually at one point 3 editor-in-chiefs, which just seems absolutely insane at the moment. But that was what would happen. And at some point during that time, Mary and everybody pretty much over 30 was pretty much let go as they were trying to decide how to merge Hachette and Murdoch and not have 2 completely different senior staffs. So what that did was that afforded me an amazing amount of opportunity and access as an extremely young person. I wasn't even 25 yet. I was probably 24 at the time, or 23. But that was how I met the whole world. And that was where I met Karl Lagerfeld. I met every fashion photographer. I met every supermodel. That time it was Naomi Campbell. It was Cindy Crawford. It was Rachel Hunter. Was given access to every major happening in New York City because we didn't have a fashion director. So even though I wasn't the fashion director, I was having to set up and coordinate all these shoots and different things. So I think that, unfortunately, I don't know now if that would happen anymore. I don't know if people would give a young person that kind of opportunity, but it was a great opportunity. Having said that, after about a year of that, I left. I went to Taxi Magazine. I followed Mary to Family Media, which no longer exists, but they had a lot of magazines like Taxi and Savvy and Model. And she convinced me to come back and be her assistant again, which was really kind of something because I had really moved past, I thought, being in that role. But she did promise me that in 6 months, she would let me kind of pick my job, which she did stay true to her word. I went to Paris. I covered the shows. I came back and I ended up being a photo editor at Taxi. I learned photography, and it was an amazing experience for me.
Wait, you're an undercover photographer?
No, not a photographer. I was an editor. So I would go on photo shoots. I met a lot of the top photographers. I worked for a woman named Debbie Smith who had been at Barney's. It was, again, just an amazing opportunity.
So great.
But at that point, I was a bit, it sounds crazy to say it, but I was burnt out, actually, and ready to kind of figure something else out. So when I was 24, I took a very small amount of money that I had inherited, and I went and I decided to go for 6 months to Australia. It was amazing. So I ended up, what was supposed to be 6 months, ended up being a year and a half of traveling pretty much around the world by myself. And I worked on a scuba diving boat in Cannes. I herded sheep on a motorcycle in New Zealand. I traveled across the desert with a group of nomads, camping with Aboriginals. Like, it was a really just mind-bending, amazing experience. And I actually turned 25 in the Hinchinbrook Channel, sailing a yacht with a bunch of different people. And so I turned 25, and I tried to figure out like what my parents, meanwhile, New York real estate is what pulled me back. My parents had a rent control department at the Apthorpe, and they said, we're going to lose this apartment if you don't come back. They had moved to South Carolina. So I moved back to New York and had no idea what I was going to do. And actually, that was where I ended up coming back to South Carolina for a little bit and got a job as an assistant location manager on Forrest Gump. Now, nobody knew that Forrest Gump was going to be Forrest Gump. I thought it was the craziest script I'd ever read. Like, if you read that script, you'd be like, this is terrible. But so that actually made me understand I could never be a script reader because obviously I had no idea. But I ended up, I like to tell this story because at this point now, I was 27. I have never really had a mentor. I mean, I've had a lot of people that I sort of like think are amazing, and I watch their careers and I might ask them for advice or help, but I never really had a serious mentor. And something else that people who are close to me know is that I have no sense of direction whatsoever. Like, I get lost in New York. Like, where's uptown, where's downtown?
I did know this about you because I have been with you to meetings, and we've been traipsing through in a pinch the subways.
Yes.
So
I love the subway, by the way.
I remember being in like Louboutins with you and running, fancy jackets,
right?
And
yes.
Running to meetings. Like, that's my memory.
Yeah, well, and not knowing really where I was going, probably depending on you. And to this day, if my assistants don't put in like cross streets, I get crazy. So anyway, I got this woman, Mary Morgan, who is a kind of a legend in location managing and working with filmmakers. She and Bob Zemeckis were very close. So she was the location manager on Forrest Gump, and there were two jobs. One was working in the office, sort of like being the coordinator, where you really were in the office from like 6 a.m. till 10 o'clock at night. The other job was working with all the talent and all the Teamsters and really being out in the field. But remember, this was before GPS, before cell phones. So you were really like, you had a map.
Wait, this is before MapQuest.
This was before MapQuest. This was before navigation. This was before anything. And she said to me, and I interviewed with her, and I was honest. I said, listen, I want this job. It'd be amazing to be a location assistant. But what do you do? And she said, well, you have to go to the location where before it's even, the sun is up at 5 a.m, you meet the Teamsters, you load in the crew, and then you do maps and you tell everybody where they're going, and you have to scout the locations. And I said, this job sounds amazing. And like, I am not your girl. Like, I can't find, I said, I know Beaufort, because she's like, you're local. I'm like, let's not push it. Like, we moved to South Carolina. I'm really a New Yorker. But she just looked at me and she said, I just know you're going to figure it out. And I will tell you, to this day, it was the hardest job I ever had and one of the most rewarding. And she became one of my mentors. So when you ask me what I wouldn't do, skip to the next job. I'm on Forrest Gump for 3 months. I moved back to New York. Doug Vaughn, who was at NBC at the time, I call him up and I say, what should I do next? And he goes, there's this woman, Peggy Siegel. She throws all the best parties and events. Maybe you should, work for her. She's kind of a nightmare. She's very difficult, but you will meet everybody, right? So you'll meet all the celebrities, you'll meet all the managers, agents, directors. So this was all leading to the career that I actually had. So I went and I interviewed with Peggy, and I ended up working with her briefly, and it was a great learning experience. I definitely learned what I wouldn't do as a boss, but I also met the whole world of entertainment. And very soon after, we parted ways, and she and I parted ways, and I ended up meeting Laura Shriftman, my business partner.
So this was a blessing in disguise.
It was a blessing in disguise. She fired me. It's the only job I've ever been fired from.
I really appreciate you saying this out loud because I can't even imagine you being fired,
I can't even remember why she fired me. It was something so stupid. I don't know. I sent the list to the wrong person or something. It
very
was like
Devil Wears Prada.
It was a very devil. She used to throw things. She would eat a lot. She would eat a whole chicken with her fingers. It was really something.
That's crass.
She's notorious right now, obviously, with everything going on. But the one thing I will say is that she would hand a young person a full movie, and you would be in charge of the whole thing, from finding the location to creating the guest list to doing the event press to working with the studio. So it was an amazing education for what was to come with building my own agency, because I created, again, all this access, all these relationships, this like Rolodex, to use an old-fashioned word, but also I just had to figure shit out. It was just like, you didn't ask questions. You just did it. You figured it out.
Wait, I have to ask, do you still have a Rolodex somewhere?
I do not have a Rolodex anymore. I finally got rid of my Rolodex, I think a couple of years ago when I was cleaning out some office. I finally threw them away. I did have them for years, though. So anyway, then that led to meeting Laura and then, creating Harrison and Shriftman. And obviously it went on to become very successful. And we were at a moment when there were either these, massive agencies or agencies that were super fashion focused, I remember KCD was basically formed a couple of years before we were. It was, Paul Wilmot and Loving and Weintraub. A lot of them are still around. Some of them aren't. But Laura and I were part of that Power Girls, New York Magazine, moment when nobody, forget about talking to diverse audiences, nobody really knew how to speak to young people, let alone to young women, right? So we were young women. I was in my early 30s. She was in her early 20s. And we had this amazing opportunity to create this company. I remember Ed McCabe from McCally's, sat at Bill Bouquet with us and was writing Shriftman Harrison, H&S, he actually created our logo for us, for nothing. And somebody else gave us an office, and somebody else gave us our first client, which was Gucci timepieces, right before Tom Ford was becoming the designer for Gucci. And the one thing I'll say to answer your question about what I would do differently is I didn't know better what to do or not to do. Laura was a force of nature, and whether you loved her or you hated her, she had this incredible energy and drive. I was not an entrepreneur by nature. I thought I would work in a company. I thought I would be in magazines or publishing. I never imagined that I would have my own agency and that it would go on to be as successful as it was. And I think that was a blessing, because if I had really probably thought about it, we had no backing. Neither of us had gone to business school. Neither of us knew anything about managing. I maybe knew a little more about managing people because I'd actually worked for people. Laura had never even worked for anybody before. But we really just kind of figured it out, and it was the right time and the right moment, and we just went. We didn't overthink it. We kind of just went. I think maybe why I wish I had enjoyed the ride a little bit more. I think I was so intense and I was so driven and I was so worried about doing it perfectly and right and never feeling like we were getting it right. I was the person who was always like, we need to do it better. We need to do it bigger. We need to scale it faster. I didn't take a moment to understand or be grateful for all the amazing things that were happening in the moment. When I look back now, I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe that we had these opportunities and we met these people and we did these incredible events and we built these brands. I was so preoccupied with just trying to keep it all together. So that would be something I would potentially think differently about now. But by the way, it's taken me to being 60 to finally stop. It's been a journey of 2 years of really taking a breath and leaning into being grateful and having gratitude and really understanding and appreciating all that I've done.
And I want to talk about your journey. And before we get there, I still have some questions about the past.
Sure.
So you've shared that access is a lost art.
Yes.
Can you please elaborate?
Yeah, I think it goes, I have two daughters, right? One is 27 and one is 23, and one works in fashion. So Georgia works for Alice and Olivia, and she's an event manager. So she's actually, working it and going out. But what I think is that those days we didn't have phones, right? So we were out and we were networking, and we were, meeting people, and we were at bars and we were at restaurants, and we were going and we were doing, and we were forced to actually create those relationships. I think now, and by the way, that access still serves me today. The people that I knew, of course, now they're so old, they're all retiring, but the ones that are still working still are helpful. But, it's just knowing all those people through the years and being able to call them or, eventually email them or reach out to them has been just a gift. And it has really helped me with my clients or with whatever it is I've been trying to do. And I think people now are not thrown together enough to actually have to work it that same way. And I mean, COVID obviously put a big wrench in things, but it just also seems to be that Gen Z doesn't seem to have, and it'll be interesting to see what the alpha generation right behind them, what they're going to be like, because they're even going to be more tuned to AI and technology. But I think hopefully we're going to see and one of the reasons, when we get to talking about like where I see my business moving, I think in real life experiences and experiential are going to be increasingly important, because you can't have a robot do that, right? It's got to be done. But I think that the access, and I try to encourage people who are younger to go out and to meet people, and to even those stupid things like take someone for a pedicure or a manicure. But it's hard because on the editor side or on the brand side, they also are more cocooned. So you really have to push yourself to find ways to like create those relationships. I think it's a lot harder than it used to be.
It was one of my favorite things that I learned from working with you. I loved it. I mean, I love to go out. I love to be in the mix and go to all the events and meet all the people. But like that mentality of having to be out there and push yourself and meet new people and connect and network and really connect. Like I emphasize that because those relationships, those people that you meet in person, that becomes your lifeline when you least expect it later on. Or maybe there's a project that comes up, or maybe there's something even personal that comes up and you're like, I remember when maybe this person knows somebody. And then it all just sort of unfolds. It taught me the networking that you really encouraged us to do. It really taught me that no one is inaccessible.
You can get to anybody. I say that to people all the time. Like, and that's, one of the things I still sell, I guess, right? Is that if I really want to get to somebody or find them, or I will find a way, whether it's through somebody I know, whether it's through somebody I don't know, whether it's through a relationship. Like there are some people you can't get to maybe, but I have yet to find, I really would challenge people to say that if you really, where there's a will, there's a way.
1,000%. Remember, I used to write those decks, and I'd be like, we're going to create these campaigns, and these are going to be the faces. And there would be people that I'd never met, but I'm like, oh, I know I can get to them.
Exactly. And you did.
I did.
We did.
So much fun.
So many events and so many things that we did where we had to get the right people in the room and curate the right crowd and get the right press and figure out the angle. I think knowing people and having relationships, people always want to do something for people they know or they like. It's still important.
So going back to community,
yes.
I want to hear what you're doing next, because I do think that there is something there. I think people are looking for connection in a meaningful way. And sometimes we spend the most time working, right? So it happens in those circles. So I want to hear what your thoughts are and your direction with the agency.
Yeah, so just to back up a little bit. So the agency, so Laura and I, we launched the agency in like 97, 98. At the same time, I met my husband. I got married, I got pregnant, I had a baby, we had 9/11. So there was a lot going on. It was, obviously it was a tumultuous time and a lot to kind of get through. And we were growing really quickly and really rapidly.
That 2001.
Yeah. So it
Carol
was
Gall, Mercedes-Benz.
Carol Gall, Mercedes-Benz was a huge win for us. She was a young woman. You were there.
Yeah.
She was somebody who really had a vision about getting Mercedes out to a younger audience, to an affluent young audience. We took them to Polo. We became the Mercedes-Benz Polo Challenge. We did the partnership with Fashion Week, which Carol really heralded, to become Mercedes-Benz Fashion Week. So a lot of firsts, like we really, even to this day when I meet people from my generation or even a bit like even younger, they'll say, oh my God, you guys invented the swag bag. You had all the best parties, the best events. We were working with all the magazines at that time. But, so we were growing and growing and growing. And then in 2004, we were probably about 70 people, and we were really like working with we had launched Juicy Couture and Jimmy Choo, and we were the people who worked with Marilyn Heston at the time, actually in LA, to put Jimmy Choo on Sex and the City, knock Manola Blahnik off.
I did not know that part, even though, and I did help ghostwrite that piece in the book.
Right.
You had an entire section of this book, and what was the title? It was something about I didn't always walk in Jimmy Choo's or something like that.
I can't even remember.
It was so good though. I mean, that was so much fun.
So there were so many, and like Juicy Couture, going to the couture, that 12-page spread in Vogue, which was like amazing. And, working with Pam and Gila when they were like a t-shirt company, to, launching denim at Joe's Pub with Duran Duran, and bathing suits. And I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And I feel so, incredibly lucky, right? I mean, we had like a front seat to all of those brands, to helping, take them to the next level. But we were growing and we were growing. And, Laura and I were partners, and we'd had moments where we like did great together. And we had moments where she drove me absolutely crazy. And I'm sure I drove her absolutely crazy. And so finding the right, we had a difficult partnership, but we made it work and we survived it. And then when we got to 2004, we were approached by William Morris, by CAA, by Gray Advertising, and by Omnicom through a guy named Ben Silverman, who had brought Who Wants to Be a Millionaire to the United States. He works for William Morris, and now he has his own company. So Ben had introduced us to Omnicom, and, they didn't know what to do with it. They were like, these girls have something, but we don't know what. This, like, they're crazy. I mean, literally, we were kind of like, they just didn't know what to do with us. But they saw something, and they knew that we had this access, and we had this entree to fashion and luxury, and they wanted it. But they were like, oh, I don't know. They're kind of insane, these girls. Like, I don't know. What are we going to do with them? But they ended up buying, 80% of us. Donnie Deutsch actually was really helpful in helping us, navigate this. He had sold Deutsch for like, I don't know how many millions, billions.
This.
So 2004, and actually Laura was like, you know what, why not? And I was like, well, I don't know. We're not big enough. We don't have enough revenue. The EBITDA is not going to be enough, whatever. But at that point, we were like, what the fuck? Like, why not?
Yeah.
It's an opportunity. And actually, it turned out to be the best thing I ever did, because it was like going back to business school. And for me, and people who sell their companies always look at me like I've lost my mind. But I really enjoyed being part of Omnicom. At the first couple of years when we did our earnout, they really didn't have much to do with us. We were part of this small group of very disparate companies, and it was fine. They were like, yeah, leave those girls alone. They're doing fine. Let's let them get through their earnout, and then we'll like figure them out. And in those days, they kind of did leave you alone, and they did let you kind of do your thing. And we were growing, and we were signing more brands. And at that time, we were doing a lot in hospitality. We were working with Ian Schrager. We were doing stuff. We'd opened our Miami office, which, we were way ahead of the curve on Miami. Now Miami, everybody's there and whatever. But in those days, it was really a one-trick pony. And so we got an office on Lincoln Road, and my client there, who was a great guy who was deep in real estate. He was A.B. Rosen's partner. I said, I really want to do a hotel. And he was going to build the W, which at that time was a Holiday Inn. And he really taught me how to do real estate. He taught me what a mezz loan was. He taught me about the design review. And we ended up working for the W for 8 years, which from literally before it was built to, all the way towards when it opened. And then that led to us getting agency of record for W Hotels when Ross Klein was there. So it was just like it was great to just be at the epicenter of all these things and growing all these categories. And what Omnicom gave us was structure, right? So we went from being, and then back to where you were then in 2008 when we became a partner or 2010 actually is when we really became part of Ketchum.
That's where I was. I was with you during that period.
That was an amazing thing. Barry Rafferty was there at the time, and she really, she and Rob Lorfink really.
She was great.
She was great.
She is great.
She is great. She's doing something else now, but she and Rob Lorfink really, saw something in us. And I was with Rob actually at the Omnicom would do this amazing thing where they had like a university. I ended up going 12 times because it was Harvard teachers doing case studies on Omnicom agencies.
So cool.
It was so great. And I just kept going. I just kept moving my way in there and going. And so I met everybody. I met all the heads of all the agencies there, like from BBDO, all the advertising, marketing. media buying agency. So that again was growing my access, right? And my Rolodex, so to speak. But Rob Lurfing said, I think you should join Ketchum. And I was like, nah, I don't know, what's Ketchum? Like I was still so bit arrogant, I guess. But I was like, okay. So then I ended up meeting Barry though, and I loved her. And Laura liked her too. And we became a complementary business to Ketchum. And that was where I really started to understand how to build real strategy, what an insight was, how an insight should drive creative, how to work with big brands like Booking.com, which we had for a decade. You know, I brought a whole different level of thought leadership to Bacardi and to these clients that we've been working with for a long time, but where we were able to level up. And it sort of was leading to, I brought in new kinds of people who came from big agency background, people who were real, not just tactical and new people, but people who understand strategy and people who understand KPIs and really like what it meant to really get in there and change perception of a brand. And it was remarkable right up to 2019, where we had the best year we'd ever had. And then, of course, the world fell apart with COVID. But I don't regret being part of Omnicom for 1 minute. I mean, I'm very grateful they gave me the opportunity to buy the company back in 2020 because we probably wouldn't have made it as part of Omnicom. I credit them with helping me learn a lot about, what I like and what I don't like. But it was a good ride.
And you've coined a term that I don't recall from my days, but
Corptique.
I'm very interested in this word Corptique, and it makes sense when you're speaking and you're telling me, the evolution of the agency. But I'd love to hear in your words how you came to coin
Corptique.
Corptique.
So Corptique actually came when we were this was a great story. We were having an offsite at Soho House right when it opened. And I actually had Lin-Manuel, if you believe.
That's amazing.
I don't know if you were there, but he came. This was well before Hamilton, clearly. But he came and he wrote a song about me and Laura, and he performed it, and it was hilarious.
Are you kidding?
No, I'm not
Wait,
kidding.
do you have it recorded?
I don't have it recorded because we didn't have phones. But we didn't have it recorded, which I kill myself. I didn't have it recorded. But yes, Lynn did that. And anyway, at this retreat, there was a woman named Eliane Henry who's still doing things, and she actually came up with the name Corptique. I don't know. We were talking about who we are, like we were visioning. So Eliane, if you're listening, I'm giving you a shout out. But it became this. It just made sense because we were corporate, but we were boutique. So we brought like the energy, the founder energy, the scrappiness, the move quick. Like I always want to move faster. Like that's my thing. In fact, even now my staff's always like, "Could you slow down, please?" Like I'm like, "No, we have to move quicker, faster, more." Like it was always like faster, faster, faster.
Nimble.
It was nimble, fast, quick. Why are we waiting? Like, make it happen. But then what I layered into that was then the corporate structure, right? Like the discipline, the rigor, and the data. And we never, before it was instinct. Everything was instinct. But as we grew and as the brands got bigger and as the demand became that you needed to back things up with more than just your instinct, then you had to like find the measurement, right? How are we measuring it? How are we finding the data to support it? And so Corptique made total sense. And it could be you could grow, you could be 60 people and be Corptique. It didn't matter. It was a mindset. And it's one I think we still to this day very much emulate.
So you now have the agency solo.
Yeah. So in 2020 when Omnicom said, listen, we think at that time, remember we were automotive, we were fashion, travel, hospitality, retail, all the things. We were spirits, which of course ended up doing very well, but nobody knew that at the time. And so they sort of said to us. I remember I was actually deeply shocked and not happy when they came to me at first and said, we think you should buy yourself back. I was kind of devastated because I had built this relationship with them. It was like I thought they were breaking up with me. Honestly, it was ridiculous. Everybody else was doing cartwheels and going, that's the best thing I've ever heard. I was like, but they don't want me anymore. It's just so bad.
Well, you had built an emotional sort of bond and connection with them.
I was very bonded to them emotionally. I mean, I'm sure if they hear this, they're going to be laughing. But yes, I felt very emotionally connected to them and to the people. And I really, I built all these relationships. So, but at the end of the day, it was an amazing opportunity. And at the same time, I talked to Laura, and we were working on very different things. She was really focused on Casamigos, and she was focused on Discovery with Mike Melvin, and she had all these great relationships, and she was doing all these amazing things, and she'd moved to Miami. And, I didn't think, and I think she would agree, that we couldn't go back to being like the same kind of partners we'd been when we were so young. I mean, a lot of time had passed. And so, she very graciously allowed me to buy her out, and she was able to then go and she's building her own thing, which is amazing. And I was left trying to figure out how to make this company work. And at that time, and even in 2018, one of the things I really prided ourselves on was we were an extremely diverse agency. I mean, now, it's interesting. PR has become a place where that really has become very accepting of diversity. But at that time, it was not, 2017, 2018. And I had built an agency that was over 70% diverse, whether that was your age, your background, whether you were Black or Latin, and part of that had been driven by Bacardi being our biggest client. We were going on 25 years with them, and the account went from Grey Goose to rum, and it demanded a different audience.
Wait, the account went more rum heavy than
we were working on Grey Goose, but we ended up losing Grey Goose and keeping the bigger.
Was it Facundo?
Well, Facundo was rum, so Facundo was like the high end luxury rum, but we ended up with the whole rum portfolio.
Oh wow!
And at that time, we were making it more premium. It was a premiumization moment. And one of the things that was the most successful was way back when Cardi B was just hitting the charts. She was right at the cusp of going to the top of Billboard. We got her to perform at the House of Yes. And we had 250, 300 influencers and press. And the CMO at the time came from London to the event. He just happened to be there. It wasn't that he was coming for the event. And he and the brand team looked around the room and said, wow, we have an African-American audience. Like, it had shifted from a more purely Latin audience to this completely different audience. And it really changed the way that they marketed the rum. It changed the advertising. It changed everything. But I needed to have my staff reflect who we were talking to. So when we hit Black Lives Matter, there was this just, incredible anger and emotion around that, along with COVID. We were already well into that. So I had the agency, I lost my partner, or, we separated. I lost Omnicom, which was all my back office for the last 15, 20 years. I had clients, obviously, who were, trying to figure it all out. I had young children, and I was it was a really nerve-wracking time. But I had a great staff. My senior leadership team was really great, and they were very in it with me. And we got an opportunity to reinvent the agency, but I'm not going to lie, it was a hard 5 years of trying to reinvent and reconsider. And we went through accounts and we lost accounts, and people who'd been with me for like 7 or 8 or 9 years, decided that they wanted to leave, which I don't blame them. It was kind of time, but it was, I would say it was like it was exhausting. I had to get a bank. I had to get insurance. I had to just figure all that out. So it was like starting over again.
What was your biggest pain point during that period of time?
Well, I would say in the beginning, it was just getting a bank, because COVID, nobody wanted, remember all the small banks were going, national, which turned out to be our bank, ended up merging and going under. So I would say just getting a PEO, which then set up my insurance and my payroll and all of that. That was really complicated. I mean, my IT alone, making the switch from getting everything over on the servers from Omnicom to our servers. We lost a lot of stuff, which was, unfortunate.
It may have some stuff from like back in the day.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even know if I should be.
You do? Well, maybe you could send it to me.
I might have some old decks.
You have old decks
from back
or case
in the
studies,
day.
I'll take them. So it was a lot.
I'll look.
I'd love to see what you have. And then just, going from being a big corporate entity with a lot of tools and a lot of resources to having to build those ourselves. And again, I will say Omnicom was great in that they really helped us for 6 months. They really helped us fill the gaps. And then also learning how to fill our own pipeline. A lot of the new business stuff had been coming through the bigger new business pipeline, although a lot of the fashion and lifestyle and cool stuff still came to us. It was, it was definitely exhausting and tiring, but it was, I wouldn't wish it necessarily on anybody. It was a lot.
Did you ever question during that period of time whether you wanted to continue the agency or possibly, pivot to a different path?
Yeah, I mean, I did. I talked to headhunters. I thought about taking a corporate job. I thought about, I never really publicly did that, but I did think about it, like, what would it be like to be a chief marketing officer at like a big company or a fashion brand or whatever. But at the end, like, I really liked running my own agency and I believed in it. And
You're great at it.
I'm good at it. I think that I've more considered. I'd say last year was a really hard year. The world has shifted and changed, and I was going through my own personal issues of shifting and changing and deciding. I'm getting older and deciding, am I still relevant? Do I still have a reason to be here? A lot of younger people coming up, and you can't stay the cool agency. You have to evolve into sort of a new type of agency, right? And yeah, last year was really hard. I felt like we weren't getting the RFPs. We weren't but I had this amazing tight group of people who were around me who just kept saying, no, we're in it with you. We're going to keep going. And so I sort of, at the end of the year, I had also started to really realize that I couldn't keep going at this same pace. I had to take a breath, and I had to step back, and I had to recalibrate and figure out how to be happier.
So you couldn't, or you didn't want to continue?
I didn't want to go forward feeling the way that I felt. I just felt like there had to be a way to be more happy, more joyful, enjoy it more. I was not happy.
Was there a moment that made you realize I'm not that happy?
Well, actually, 2 years ago, I was at a conference, and it was a marketing conference, and I met a man named Omani Carson, and he was actually giving a keynote, and he's a billionaire and very successful, but completely different than me. He's from Nebraska. His name used to be Ron Carson. He has a wealth management and finance company. It couldn't be more different. But when he was talking about how no matter how much money he made, he wasn't happy. He's a workaholic. He was living in this kind of mindset of scarcity and fear. And he really did this incredible shift to feeling abundance and wealth, but not wealth in the classical sense, but to being full. And I thought, wow, that's kind of interesting. Here's a guy who's made $200 billion, and, he is, doing great and he's successful. But when he was making all this money, he just didn't, because I always felt like the more money I would make, the happier I would be. Somehow I would have more. He and I ended up, it was a crazy thing. We ended up sitting on this school bus together. Diane Nyad, the swimmer, was going to lead a walk, which was intimidating enough. But he ended up getting on this bus and sitting next to me. And for 45 minutes, this man, I did not shut up. I actually wrote about it on LinkedIn, but we ended up talking, and I just was like, wow, you're just amazing. And he had created this thing in Nebraska where he was offering people an opportunity to come and look at life a little bit differently. And I said, you know what, that seems sort of really interesting. And so he gave me a cell phone number, which I thought was also remarkable. And I called him a month later, and I said, I'm still not really happy. And he said, why don't you come up and let's talk about stuff? And so I went up, and he introduced me to a whole new community of people. And I really took a look at my life, and I said, you know what, something has to shift and change. And he ended up hiring me, and we did this big Forbes article together. It took 8 months to happen. It was a labor of love, but it was a lot. He wrote very openly about his personal journey of using psychedelics to actually help him change his mindset and open up. And that led me to think, well, maybe there's something there. I've been exploring this whole new world, and it's had a remarkable effect on me in terms of just connecting my head to my heart. And I think that's where I was stuck. I was just in my mind all the time, just always thinking and questioning and beating myself up. And so by this sort of therapy, and I'd been in therapy, I'd done lots of things, but it took this different, this almost like they it's like a sacramental thing. It's like sacrament. This has been happening for years and years. The indigenous people have been using these things, but it opened up a pathway to my heart, and it allowed me to feel real joy and happiness. And, it's been 2 years of just breathing, and, it's helped my marriage. It's helped my relationship with my friends. It's helped my relationship with my children. And I see where the softening is not a negative thing. And this is something else I would tell my younger self, that there is a way to be soft that can also be extremely effective in leadership. Because I come from a school of tough. You got to be tough. You got to lead. You got to demand. You got to order people. You got to, what's next? What's happening? And I think that there's a a new style and it's maybe a little bit more leaning into the feminine, which I also think is okay now, which I would not have thought was okay then, to allow yourself to soften and lead that way. And that sometimes, you can get as good, if not better results with less damage.
So what does soft leadership look like for you?
Soft leadership looks like more listening. Although I would be interested to ask my staff if they think that I've done better with this. But it's listening more. It is going back to leading a little bit more on instinct. It is sort of like listening to yourself and going inside to sort of say, is this the right path? Is this the right thing? It comes with less pushing, a little bit more of just opening up to the universe and saying, you know what, is this meant to be? It's a little bit more of accepting things as opposed to fighting and just, hammering things home, like it's not less pushing. It's not less hard work. It's not about working less. It's not about having less expectation, but it's about changing the way that you open up and expect people to respond, I think.
I can see now, looking back, that you must have been very hard on yourself. And I'm saying that because I remember I worked for you and you gave me the runway to get shit done. And I always appreciated that. I appreciated how strategic you were. And I wanted to get in on that, and I learned a lot from you. And I remember thinking, okay, this strategy, ROI, this is exactly what businesses and brands need. And I had come from corporate, right?
Yeah, I remember
and I
that.
was coming into an agency world and learning PR and communications from where it starts,
right?
Not from, oh, we just launched this new car and let's make PR happen. It doesn't work that way.
No.
I had to understand the newsworthiness of all the things. But going back to, I always appreciated how strategic you are. But back then, I loved that. But you had a level of expectation I think was completely acceptable. We should have been rising to the occasion to do that because if we gave a shit about our jobs, which I know I did,
yeah,
I wanted to be there. So I don't think that was a lofty expectation. I think that was just a realistic one. And you were paying me to do my job, but you gave me space,
Yeah, I did. I mean, listen, you were also coming of the generation that, you were good at your job and you took it seriously and you realized that the job had to get done, right? So when a new generation, when the millennials came on board, you're a millennial, but you're
a zennial.
You're a zennial. So I think what happened was, the workforce shifted, right? And changed and the job market changed. And we all, as leaders, complained a lot. I mean, we really did. We complained all the time, right? They don't get shit done. They don't work. They don't get it. They want to go take yoga at 5 o'clock. They have all these boundaries, and I think I was very ununderstanding of that because it just was not how I was brought up in the industry. I think when I say softening, I don't mean that I don't have the same expectations and that people don't have to do a good job. I think that it is in my approach to how I might ask or how I might listen or how I might let things go a little bit more. I am such a driver. I'm a deal junkie. I love new business. I'm really good at it. I can, always say I could sell ice to an ice. If I decide I'm going to sell you something, good luck. I mean, once in a while I don't make it, but usually I will sell it to you in some form. But
or
I think, or at some point.
Yes.
But I think I don't know. I mean, I guess what I also want to say is that I didn't appreciate with this new community of people that I've met who are not a lot of them are not New Yorkers, but a lot of them, they're East Coast, West Coast, Midwest. But I think, understanding the power of sisterhood and the community of women is something I also, as a young woman, did not really understand or appreciate at all. I was very much about hanging out with the guys. I wanted to be with the boys. I wanted to be with the men. They felt like they were the success. They were drivers. I have always been able to pretty much compartmentalize my emotions. So very hard to get me ruffled. I would go to anger as opposed to if I was anxious, I would be angry, right? Mm-hmm. And I was modeling after these guys, a lot of them in the real estate world, who were just not taking no for an answer, right? So to me, the female side always felt, they were whining, they were complaining, they were it was too soft, it was too emotional. That just wasn't for me. I think that maybe what I know, like what I've understood now and feel very strongly about is the power of femininity and, it's going to sound very woohoo, but like divine femininity, right? Like really reaching into like the power of being a woman, and I had no clue about that. Right. And so even the people in my spiritual world now laugh at me because they're like, oh my God, 2 years ago, you would have been like laughing at us if we said this. I was highly skeptical. Right. But I've seen it. Like I've seen it, and I've seen the power. And I see also in my own life, and even this year, last year, fourth quarter was a terrible quarter. And I was just like, you know what, maybe it's just time to shut it down. Maybe it's okay. Like, I'm tired, like I could just go on, I could do something else. I could write a book, I can do a podcast, I could consult, and I went on vacation. I took this amazing trip to Bali, to Malaysia and Singapore, and I really just didn't work and just got inspired and spent time with my family. And I came back and I started meditating. I got a meditation instructor. I highly recommend meditation. So I went into TM and you have to do it. It's like it's 20 minutes 2 times a day. So it's a commitment. But I really started to do it. And all this space started to kind of open up for me. And when I came back, literally the first week I was back, we were signing business and things were just happening. And all of a sudden, it was remarkable. It was miraculous. Like we went from it was crickets to all of a sudden we had so much incredible opportunity, and we were signing it and doing it and making it happen. And I was like, okay, the universe is not ready for me to shut this down yet. There's still stuff to do. And I was, letting it go and delegating and letting the people in my company really take it over and spending time doing the things that I want to do and on my own personal development. I was like, wow, okay, you know what? This stuff really works.
So you let go?
Yeah, I let go.
To hold on.
I let go to hold on. I let go to move forward. I let go to I softened, I think.
So would the same things that would have ruffled your feathers like 5 years ago remotely bother you today? And if they did, like, how would you handle it differently?
I mean, I think I'm leaning more into, or trying to be less. I think I've recognized that when I get nervous and anxious about something, whether it's losing a client or a relationship or feeling confronted, I try to just take a step back and be a little bit more curious about what those feelings are, as opposed to being as reactive. I think mostly what we are is super reactive, right? Somebody says something, you react. Something happens to you, you react. And usually the first reaction is not necessarily the wisest. So I think that whereas I would have been, super reactive, I'm really working on myself to be less reactive. And I think that is something that comes with age. Becoming older has been a whole journey in and of itself. And I just had a very tragic thing happen. My brother lost his wife very young and very suddenly in the past month.
Oh my gosh, Elizabeth, I'm so sorry. I just got the chills. I'm so sorry.
Thank you. And my dad got very sick, had a heart attack at the same time. So there was a lot of things.
Is
right,
your dad
happening.
Okay?
He's okay. But I think the way I reacted to all of it was much different than I might have reacted 20 years ago or 10 years ago. I think I was able to take a deep breath and process it, and also let myself feel it, as opposed to just shoving it down and not letting myself not feel it to the point where I couldn't function. I had to function. I had to help. I had to be stable. I think I was able to greet it with more empathy and compassion and understanding, and give myself more grace than I might have before.
So you've mentioned that you feel like you are a better wife, parent, boss, mentor than you were in the past.
Yeah, although I will say it's been really one of the things that's been amazing about having hired and mentored so many people through the years is, when you go to something with younger people, I've had hundreds of people work for me, and I sadly can't remember every single one of them, but they will come up to me and say, and tell me a story of something they learned working for me, or something they absorbed, or something they read, or it just happened actually even as recently as a month ago, somebody came up and said, I learned so much watching you and coming to your events, and I remembered her, but it was just that's what's so amazing, is to feel like you've had an impact on so many people through the years, hopefully a positive one, but I that's something I hope to continue to do, is to have like a positive impact on the people around me.
It's amazing. If you look at your alumni, so to speak.
Oh, my alumni is crazy.
It's amazing the things that people are doing. I just met not that long ago Sarah.
Sarah
I met
Wendenhall.
Sarah.
Yeah.
At Lydia Finay's event. And remember Lydia? We worked with her when she was at Christie's. Yep. Yes. And she and I were chatting, and she mentioned something about Harrison and Shriftman. And I was like, what? You worked there too?
Yeah.
And she said, yes. And it was so cool to see what people who have worked for you are doing. I mean, there's so many people that are doing incredible things.
Yeah, Rainer Penchansky, who started, that incredible influencer marketing company. Yeah, Sarah worked on Hugo Boss, and she was amazing. And it's been great to see what she's been able to accomplish with the colony. It's fabulous. I mean, I run into people, they become clients, like Anu, who's was at Pernod Ricard and LVMH, and who actually hired us. It's really fun when your past employees like go on to hire you. Yeah, I mean, there's just been so many, and they've gone on to do all kinds of different things, and that's really rewarding, actually.
I can imagine.
Yeah,
I feel like we should do an alumni community event. Talk about a community.
Yeah,
I would be curious to see what
it would be great. Well, we
to.
have reunion dinners like Luis and Nikki and Anina and Annalisa. Like there's like a group, and that's the other thing that's been great is so many people. I mean, people used to call Harrison and Shriftman boot camp, because we would give people this opportunity. You sink or swim kind of thing, but we would give people this amazing opportunity, and they would say to us, like, I learned more at Harrison and Shriftman in 1 year than I learned like 5 years anywhere else or in a brand or whatever. And they actually, because I think they were in this environment, they made these incredible relationships with each other that to this day, many of them are still best friends.
I mean, Anu and I are still friends.
Yeah. I just talked to Anu today. Yeah. So it's great. I love that.
It's incredible. I feel like it really was boot camp at times. I mean,
yes,
there was some serious.
It was hard.
There were some serious situations, but it's so funny because they felt like such big emergencies at the time. Like I literally remember being on a plane going somewhere with Anu, and there was some Bacardi something.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And we're sitting on the plane, and Anu is like trying to text or make a phone call. I think she was on the phone with Vicky or Michelle or someone. And she's like, okay, well, I'm about to be on the plane. I'll take care of it as soon as I land. And the flight attendant is coming by saying,
get off your phone.
You have to get off the phone. And Anu's like, but it's an emergency. And the flight attendant says, well, if it's such a big emergency, you can take it off the, outside of the plane.
Right.
And Anu's like, oh, okay, all right. And we powered down and we were done. But like, I literally remember the next however many hours, Anu and I were like trying to work through whatever situation was going to be when we landed. So it's a funny thing. It's like, we really felt like we were in the trenches. Like we felt like we were at war. Like it was crazy.
Well, we have a saying, and it's not my saying, but it's not the ER, it's PR. But we would forget about that sometimes. And I think I've had some crazy situations where, you think like you really believe that the world is like, I mean, there have been things, especially in events. I will say you have to have a strong constitution if you're going to do high profile big events, because something always will go wrong and you have to be able to figure it out.
And you have to make it look like nothing
happened. Yeah.
Oh, that was kind of the beauty of it. And that was, I'm reminiscing now. I'm like, that was actually amazing.
It was amazing.
Because if you can do an event, you can do anything. I really do believe that to this day. Okay, so looking back.
Yes.
At everything, if you could do anything all over again, personally, professionally, would you? And what would it be?
There's nothing, I don't believe in looking back that way and saying like what could have, would have. Like, I think everything happens for a reason. And I don't mean that as a cop-out answer, but there's no one thing where I would say like I would do it differently. I mean, there's little nuances or things that I might treat differently, or clients I think I could have kept if I had tweaked things or changed things or whatever. But I really believe that I've had this like incredible opportunity in this life and have met all these amazing people. I mean, I wish I could have scaled bigger. That was one of the things, that I always wish that I could have become like $100 million company, but I don't, but then looking back, and this is still the conundrum even to today, is the kind of clients that I like to work with. It's very hard to get to those sizes with, luxury, fashion, lifestyle. I mean, I'd have to have gone into healthcare, or I would have had to have veered into like more crisis work, or, things that tend to offer bigger opportunity or become even more corporate, and lost the boutique side, right? Because, that's kind of how you grow.
And the fun.
And so I think it's all kind of going in the path it's supposed to, and I'm not done. Like, I think there's a whole nother chapter yet to be written. And, I don't know whether that's, selling the company again, which would be a great story, or, maybe writing that book. Or I do think that health, wellness, longevity is an incredible opportunity right now. I'm interested in potentially building a brand in that. The path of spirituality. There's a whole community of people that I have met that you would know nothing about, that no one in our world knows about, that are doing remarkable things and that are really healing. And actually, Omani is going on to creating this thing called Omya, which is like a YPO for conscious leadership, conscious leaders. And I think the world's in a really fucked up place right now. And I think you need people that are using AI to actually help the world be a better place and figure it out. And I've met these people who really care more about that than they care about, they're don't get me wrong, they're conscious capitalists, but they are focused on finding ways not to make money, but to do that while making the world better. And that's something really interesting to me. So I want to lean more into that. I want to lean into how to help people. I think also there's still not, as much as it's become, when I turned 50, nobody talked about menopause. I didn't know what the hell was going on, and nobody talked about it. Now it's a whole different world. 10 years later, everybody's talking about it. But there's still, I'm doing a half Ironman. And that's another personal challenge. People are like, what?
Yeah, where did that come from? When were you I'm going to do a half marathon?
I don't know.
That's kind of a big deal.
Honestly, I've always been into fitness. I did 2 half marathons. And, I always make the big leap. I like brands, right? So I think Ironman is an amazing brand.
Yes.
And so I started to watch their videos and I started to see how they brand themselves. And I thought, you know what? I wonder if I could do a half Ironman. I'm not a great swimmer. I really don't like bike riding. But I thought, I don't want to run a marathon. I think that's too much actually on my knees and on my hips. But I know I can do a half. And I'm learning how to swim, which is really interesting because it's very technical. And it's actually really more technique than fitness. And I have a trainer, so I'm doing my biking. And I think it's kind of a badass move, right? To do it. And it gives me a goal and it keeps me moving. And it's also now plugged me into this whole other world of I'll tell you, I'm on HRT. And when you start to really work out really hard and your body fat goes down, it makes your hormones go a little bit haywire, right? So, and there's no research on it.
Really?
Yeah. So it's really interesting. And I'm thinking, well, why hasn't anyone done any real research on that? So that's something that I'm thinking about.
My understanding from, living in the fertility space for a while is that women's health is the most underfunded, researched area of ever anything. Most of the things that we find or are shared, research that we receive is almost always focused on men, and then it's sort of parsed out like it's for everybody. And that is very concerning.
Yeah. And it's true. It's a thing. And people like Halle Berry, who are, starting companies to really get people to be more aware of what happens when you get older and, sexual health and well-being. I'm interested in that, right? I think, that's because that's where I am right now, right? So I think I'm obsessed with Esther Perel. I think she's amazing. I think the way she talks about relationships and monogamy and, I think it's a new world, right? In terms of how people are relating to each other. I worry about men right now and young men. And I think it's a really confusing time to be a man, especially a young man. These women, because I have 2, they show up really strong.
I'm curious.
I think that, we send a lot of mixed messages to men. We want consent and we want them to be asking and we want them to be consulting us on everything, but then we want them to show up rich and we want them to be virile and we want them to take care of us and we want them to dominate us and we want them to do all this other stuff. So I think they're sort of like, well, which is it, And so that's why I think you see men on the right, veering very much into that sort of traditional toxic masculinity. And then you see a lot of guys that just are like throwing up their hands and just swiping all the time because they can't figure out what it is they want. And you have a lot of women, and I've met a bunch of them in their 40s who are just saying, you know what, if the men aren't going to step up, I'd rather be alone. I'd rather have a baby by myself. I'd rather live with women. There's this whole community of women that are living with other women, and they're not necessarily homosexual or gay. They just are finding community with other women, and they are choosing not to partner in the same traditional ways.
And finding peace.
And finding peace and finding happiness. And, they're supporting themselves. And, and I think, though, there's an opportunity now for men to really get with the program, and like step up and figure out what it is they need to do in order to meet women where they are.
So what would you say?
Probably get a lot of hate from the men watching this, but I hope men hear it, because I think men need to hear it.
So if you were going to talk to a parent that is raising a son right now, what would you say?
I would tell first of all, I wouldn't overparent. I think there's this whole generation of helicopter parenting is also not great. Like, it's not how I parented. My girls know how to make plane reservations, get doctor's appointments, pay their bills. Like, I think there's a generation of parents that just overdid everything for their children. And I think for boys in particular, those parents that just, mommied them all the time, I think those boys, they grow up to be mommy boys, right? Mm-hmm. So they don't necessarily know how to be a man, right? So I think teaching young men how to relate to women and how to treat them is, I think I hope that that's what's happening. I hope that I didn't have boys, so it's hard for me to say I had girls, but my friends who have boys who I think are doing it really in a beautiful way are teaching their sons to be responsible and to be good citizens and to be, good guys.
But see, I still love this about you, even though you're not a boy mom. I know you ask a lot of questions.
Yeah, I do ask a lot of questions.
And I know you're getting the feedback, which is why I asked you. Otherwise, I understand that you're a girl mom. And to that end, what are you most proud of when it comes to your kids, when it comes to your girls? What are you the most proud of? Like, how are you the most proud of them?
Oh my God, I'm so proud of them on so many levels. I'm really proud that they're strong, they're independent, but yet they're also extremely loyal and loving and gentle. Like they just, they have this amazing grace about them. My daughter's getting married. Actually, Charlotte's getting married to her fiance, Natalie, in May. Yes, another Natalie.
That.
And I love that she picked like a beautiful woman to marry. And I love that she wants to have a baby and that she is choosing to be in partnership. And, I love that she's got a great job and that she supports herself. And, so I love that. And I love that my younger daughter is, picked a career that's somewhat like mine. I can't say I don't think that that's fun, but she's doing it her way, and she's working in a brand and she's way more competent than I was at her age. She's just like, she's got a lot of Keith in her. She's very, very, very organized. And so I love that about
organized.
her. I'm organized, but I'm organized on the work front, not so much on the personal. Keith really takes care of a lot of that. Georgie's organized on both fronts.
That's key.
I feel like they're good human beings. They're good people.
And I'm jealous of Georgie. That is seriously so key that she can be organized on both fronts.
She's organized on both fronts.
That's incredible. So what kind of legacy would you like to leave behind, both personally and professionally?
Professionally, I feel like my legacy is that I did a lot, like Harrison Shriftman did a lot of things first. Like we invented the swag bag. We changed the way people perceived. We changed the way people perceive brands like, I mentioned them, but like Jimmy Choo and Juicy Couture. We mixed uptown with downtown back when, we would put a princess next to an editor, next to a artist, next to a socialite. So I think we did a lot of things first. I think I like the legacy that we built a company, sold it to a big public company, and then bought it back. I like the legacy of that I've, what we talked about and touched on before, that I've had hundreds of young women and men, but, predominantly women, go through Harrison and Shriftman and hopefully come out with feeling like they really learned something and that they got something from it. That would be my professional legacy. I think my personal legacy is that people feel one of the things that I didn't, the thing that I've also realized, I think in the last 5 years maybe, but predominantly in the last 2, is that I have a very powerful personality and a persona, and that my words land, pretty powerfully. And I think that's again in the softening piece, right? Like understanding that what I say has an effect on people. And actually my coach, who I was working with, she kind of brought this to my attention that, because sometimes I would be like, well, I don't understand. Why is she upset? Like I would say something. I'd be like, I don't understand. What's the big deal? Like I didn't really understand. But then when I would play it back, or when the person would say how it impacted them or how it landed, I would say, oh, you really cared about what I said and it really landed a certain way. So I think like my personal legacy would be that I affected and impacted people in my personal life and my professional life in a good way, that I left things better as opposed to destroying things or leaving things in a worse way.
And when it comes to your kids, what kind of legacy would you like to leave behind?
Oh my God. Well, I don't know. You should ask them. But I just like them to say that they felt like, it's so funny because I'm doing all this work of like looking back, my poor parents, because, everybody does the best they can as parents, right?
Yes.
And so, I think the way that I probably think I parented my kids, they'll be in therapy in 10 years saying, oh, my mother did this, my father did that. But I hope they just feel like, they got the love and the acceptance that they needed and wanted, and that they felt whole.
I love that, Elizabeth. I feel like you're such a great communicator, and this softening thing is going to do well for you too, and your kids. But I really appreciate that, because I think that you care. It's interesting the way things land, and maybe that's a generational thing, because if you said something that didn't perhaps land easily, I know that it was because it was out of love in a way, right? Like you cared about the end result professionally, and then it just kind of moved that way personally. I don't know. That's where my mind goes.
Well, I'm glad. I think that
I didn't take it personally.
You were a generation too that was able to take criticism probably a little bit better. I think that, a little of that fortitude and ability to hear direct feedback is good. And, I don't think that that's something I'm going to stop doing. I think it's just something I might do a little bit.
Your next book. We talked a little bit about a book, right?
Yes.
If you were really going to write that book, what would the name of the book be?
Oh my God, I have no idea. What do you think I should call it?
Oh my gosh, the boomerang story. I mean, I literally feel like, how you love boomerangs, right? To come back to work for you.
I do love boomerangs.
But not even that part. It's the fact that your entire business became a boomerang, right? Like you sold your business and then you got it back. There's a boomerang story. I'm telling you, there's something there.
I mean, it's something like life lessons learned and loved, and how I fucked it up and then got it back. I mean, it'd have to be some kind of really provocative title.
Yes.
Those 2 girls who wrote the book about cool girls get fired, or what that book, I forget that book, but I love those
something
too.
like that, yeah.
But like, I'd have to think of some really catchy title, you know.
Would.
But I it's something I'm thinking of it. I mean, right now I'm thinking like a Substack. I'm thinking about a podcast. I'm thinking about. I just have to get my social media even more together. But like, I do think that this next iteration is a little bit about deciding. It's a lot of work to build your own brand. So I don't know whether that's ultimately what I'm going to do, but it feels like that could be a possibility.
Whatever you decide to do, I know you're going to do it. And I'm so excited to hear what's next, because like, I love how you continue to reinvent yourself in a progressive, in a very fluid way. So thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. This was fun. It was like a look back and forward at the same time. And yeah, and thank you you were great when you worked for me. I really, I remember those. And those were like sort of those were the days, those were like when we were really in the center of a lot of things. And it was a lot to keep up with it. But I mean, I know you felt like you got value and you built great relationships and learned.
Loved that experience. I mean, listen, it's not sustainable to work like that, right? Like I look back and I'm like, wow, how did I do all of that stuff?
Right.
But I took so many great learnings into Audi and beyond, like even consulting. Like I learned so much. And I think that it taught me being nimble. It taught me to be beyond resourcul.
Problem solver.
It taught me how to tell a story.
Yeah. Storytelling is still at the heart of everything that we do. And I would just say also with, look, it's a hard time right now. A lot of consolidation, a lot of merger and acquisition in our space, and a lot of senior people are out of work right now or scrambling or starting their own thing and their own consultancy. And I just remind people to take a breath, because it's all cyclical and it's all going to shift and change again. But I think, there's a lot of great people that are out. I'm enjoying the fact that I'm reconnecting with a lot of people and trying to find ways to rehire them or bring them in, or, be able to find, because they have so much, like, getting older doesn't mean you have more value. I mean, you really do, because you have so much wisdom and you have so much experience. And I do say sometimes, I love hiring a grown-up. And by the way, a grown-up can be a young person, but somebody who actually doesn't need to be micromanaged and told what to do. Somebody who actually knows how to think critically, which is something I do worry this generation has lost that a bit.
These are words of wisdom, and I hope that anyone who's listening is taking that to heart. Elizabeth, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks,
it
Natalie.
Truly means the world, and I'm so excited we got to reconnect.
Me too.
Thank you.